Hello, I'm George Hayes, and this tutorial today is going to be on SDL 2.0's more font handling stuff and better keyboard handling primarily. Alright, and one of the issues you had as far as I discussed towards the end of the last tutorial uh, is the issue that you can't really see multiple keys hit it at one time. The problem with that is, obviously, if let's say you got a character that's running along and you want him to jump, you're going to run, then you're going to hit jump, and it's going to jump straight up, and you're not going to be running at the same time. Or if you want to strafe right, straight left while you're going forward or backwards, or things like that. Anything that you need multiple key recognition for, you're only going to get the state of one key at a time with just going by the previous method from with the SDL. So the solution to handling that comes up to something about as simple as this here. You create a small class called a keyboard handler, right? And you keep a boolean state of each key, 1 being that it's pressed, 0 being that it's not pressed. Then all you do is make sure all those are set to 0. Trust me, if you don't, you'll end up regretting it. And then set state, as far as for actually setting the state of that, what you're dropping in is the key code. All right, and then the boolean state as far as that, whether it's pressed or not pressed. Okay, now what I did is I go back to my event handler, then in here, and when it's a key down, all I have to do is put event as far as the key and scan code, and then the SDL key is pressed. And when the key comes up, key handler, set state, event key systems first getting the scan code, and SDL key is released. Alright, and the scan code actually refers to, basically, as far as I can tell, the actual hardware value being returned from the keyboard. Alright, and so there's only a limited number as far as when it comes to those, and it's pretty actually easy to sit there and see. And I have that set up as far as down here to where you can just see the scan code and stuff like that, where it runs as far as on it and gives back the so-called key name. Now the key name you can't exactly go by on here, even when you do it this way, or the way if I did it up here. I tried both different ways to see if they had a more accurate means of it, and I'll show you what I mean here real quick. And because I have the system sitting outside any checks to make sure it's actually a key being pressed, it's actually picking up mouse returns, as you can see on that. So if I leave the mouse still here, we can sit there and see after this what I'm actually pressing. So if I hit A right now, the 229 seems to be the right shift as far as in my keyboard. For some reason it's getting returned on a number of keys. It may be an actual keyboard error or something like that, but the 4 and the A is correct as far as on that. That's first one is key being pressed down, and the 4A coming back up is key being released. Alright, here's S, D, F. Right, so then if I go A, B, C, D, E, F, you can see as far as like that. But now if you come over to the keypad, now they have their scan code set correctly as far as with the keypad. So if you go by their scan code where it says like SDL scan code KP-1 and I hit 1, well, it's great. It'll recognize it that way. But as you can see, it comes out 89, and that's the ASCII code for Y, and that seems to be what they're utilizing as far as in the return value on the function down here, SDL get key from name. And if we take a look at the ASCII code 89, alright, that's Y, and I think that's why we're ended up getting the Y, because it's not actually basing it off of something that's related to the actual value as far as like whether it's being number 1 or keypad 1 or something like that. So it's returning Y either way. But if you looked, it does return as far as like 90 and so forth like that, so it won't get them mixed up. And if you look as far as into SDL and we come down to events and check the page up here as far as on it. You can go, maybe I'll show you how to get there just in case you haven't been there. So we'll go ahead and clear out of this and go lib SDL.org and then come down to wiki. Alright, and API by name, and that's how you get into all these. Okay, so you go to events and you have your keyboard events and stuff like that, right? So here's keyboard events, and then it's going to drop you down to key sim, and then your scan code and key codes. These going to come up very similar charts as far as on this, and there's some differences if you look at them. You know, want to have more information down at the bottom and so forth on one side and the other, but these scan codes here actually refer to like the 9 and 89 and stuff like that that you're seeing being put out as far as by that one portion of the code that I have in my thing. And so that's what these actually refer to. You can actually go in and sit there and type that in. If I went to, let's see, load content, and here I did and let's see, we go SDL dash. Alright, so if we build that, after I close this back up over here, alright, run it. Alright, very first thing it put out was 89, and that was that scan code for keypad 1. And if we look on here, and I come back to here and I hit 1, there's that 89Y. Okay, and so we'll go ahead and take that back out because don't need it in there. And so that's where you can get your scan codes and stuff like that, and you can match them up. Now, where's that come in handy? Well, if we look on as far as the event thing here, handler, we'll see. Sorry, go back up here. Alright, as far as the event handler, right now I have as far as putting in the keys and keys down like that. But now, if I want to handle multiple keys at one time, all I have to do is keypad handler is pressed SDL key graves, and keypad handler is pressed SDL scan code LRC. And all I did to sit there and use that keypad handler is I created a keypad handler, key handler. Alright, and so we're left with the ability to sit there and check two keys at a time, make sure they're both pressed, or in this case I have, you know, checking for SDL, the escape key under two different circumstances. So here I create console, I set it to true. If console is true, then I just set console to false. If console is not false, I set running to so if console is false, then I set running to false, which can exit out of the program. So build again, I'm going to show you that. So I hit control tilde key up here, and I can actually go in and type stuff, hit return and go down lines, and so I can go set it to do like 10 lines as far as on that, and it just continues, and so no further on that. But and then I did a little bit of backspace handling. This isn't the way I would actually go through and do this. I would actually prefer to move this off into a console class or some kind and set up separate functions as far as for actually displaying the line of text like a printf type statement versus what we have here. You know, this is just to get it out so you can see how things are done and being run. So whatever you do, don't do it this way. And I certainly wouldn't want to dump all this console information and leave it sitting in my keyboard event handler. It should be moved outside of there. You might want to set an event switch where, like, okay, if the keyboard has been hit, do this, and then go handle that off. And here, let's go ahead and escape real quick. So now I'm outside the console area, see, and it just types out there. If it escape again, it quits the program. All right. So anyway, like all this stuff from here down, right, should actually be moved to some other location. As far as that's my opinion. All right, I think it ties up this area too much and clutters it up too much. Now, that's, you can do as you want. So anyway, what we did here is we checked for two keys and we set it as far as like the console mode, and then as far as, if we hit escape, it gets out of the console mode, and if you're not in the console mode and you hit escape, it exits the program. All right, fairly simple. Now, this here is where I was talking about as far as the keys not being set up and all. You could set up an array or something to sit there and give you the values that you want to display for it. So for example, if you wanted to, instead of displaying that Y over there, you could actually use an array or table lookup to take that and convert it over to what you want. All right, by going by the scan code instead of, you know, actually displaying the wrong character and so forth like that. All right. But as it is, I turn around and used the, for you checking for two keys here again, either or, the shift or right, shift left, as far as being pressed on it, to set, and then it converts lowercase to uppercase as far as on here. All right, and it's fairly simple stuff. Basically, I'm just filling the line up with the key letters if the keys thing. Now there is one thing as far as see if I can think of it as here I'm actually checking to make sure that the last letter in the line isn't the, how you put it, same as the current letter being put in, because this thing operates so fast right now that if you're sitting there doing it, when you push the key once, you'll end up with double key presses. So I'm having to check for it. So obviously this is other stuff that you have to sit there and deal with as far as in there. I have an unsigned int for ticks. This is all just to show you the type of stuff you'll have to deal with if you're having it type in large amounts of text. If you're doing a single line and stuff, and you're doing very basic stuff, you could do it differently. All right, and if you there is some stuff as far as for handling multiple lines in here and things like that, as far as like being able to skip down, which is actually in the on render here. We actually set our position as our next Y position by the line height, which is on load content here. We get the line height by using TTF font line skip, which tells us the amount of distance down we need to go for our next line. All right, otherwise you could end up with large gaps between your lines. All right, and so that's why there's a lot of stuff like that as far as in here. Now, okay, so this here just grabs the letter as far as from the scan code, all right, that it's supposedly given out. All right, and if that letter is, let's see, if the size of the line is greater than 0, all right, that's one thing you got to check. The last data in the line, all right, is set as far as to last. So this character here is set to last if there's, because if you get to a line and there happens to be no characters in it, you don't want to be using this function, because it'll sit there and give you an error. Simple as straight as it gets. All right, so we're looking for the last character. All right, we're pulling a C string off of it, and we're grabbing that last character and looking for the last letter if there's any letters in that line that you're on. Okay, so then you get that sets last that. So now we check to see if last equals letter. All right, which is the current one that you're sitting there and just got. All right, if it's not, or if the tick count has gone past whatever I set in here, which is type delay 150, then it can sit there and go on to repress that letter. So in other words, I have to have it down for 150 milliseconds for it to sit there and actually type that letter again. So if I hold A down, right, it's every 150 milliseconds it can put up another A. All right, it won't do it unless I sit there and that's already built. Let's see. All right, so I control tilde to get into the console command. As you can see, the tilde still comes up. All right, but now if I hit A, it doesn't double tap. Now if I hold it down, it can go out, but it takes 150 milliseconds in between its things, and it seems like it's a little more, but yeah, maybe it's program running code or whatever in there. But anyway, that's where that comes in, is so I don't end up with multiple keys without intentionally meaning it. All right, and you can set the type, delay to whatever you need as far as on it, or you think is best for your game and so forth. But that would, since this is interior to the console area, it wouldn't affect how fast keys are recognized out here. So, for example, if I'm not in a mode where I'm typing, I'm running or something like that, jumping out, well, this would be at full speed, where this here's a little less. So, uh, okay. So once it does that, it can go into here, all right? And it's accepting ones between 32 and 128. The only reason I did that has to do with these ASCII codes, because 32 goes like the space, and it's basically all the visible keys up to here, all right? And so then all I do is, if it's there, all right, if I'm holding down the shift and the scan code is in there, right, or shift or right shift, that happens to be at the same time that I've got one of those letters in, it then sits there and just changes it from lowercase to uppercase by subtracting 32. And if you look back at the scan codes here, here is uppercase and lowercase 6597. As you can see, it's a difference of 32. All right, very simple. That's the easiest way I know to switch from one to the other. All right, ticks is then incremented, which sets you up for your next scan, time for your um, keystroke. Okay. Else if key handler is pressed, SDL scans code backspace. Okay, this handles going back as far as a character on each line. All right, so that's what this first line does. All right, and then if it happens to 0, it jumps back one additional line, and so that takes care of that. Now, else if keyboard handler scan code is returned, well, this is for us to increment the line. That's all it does. Okay, so it goes to the next line. And those lines are actually set up just like this. And like I said, there's a lot better ways to do this. This is just to sit there and show you, the keyboard handling and stuff like that, as far as and getting the line movement. All right, now I'm using, as far as message, TTF as far as on here, which was set up back here again as far as my surface. All right, and then textures, I have 10, up to 10 of them, because we can display up to 10 lines simultaneously. All right, now, okay, so if it's going to run through and check for all 10 lines, right, up to the line count that I have. So if I've only typed in 5 lines, it only goes up to 5 lines. All right, so it checks the message, right, sees if there's any data in the string. If it is, then it creates the message surface. All right, and then if it's not null, all right, because if the line happens to be empty, all right, then it won't create that actual texture as far as in there. So then we're going to create the texture, right, which was from back there, the textures on it, as far as here it is, SDL texture. All right, because the other one was surface. All right. Sorry. And that's going as far as with the line number as far as on it. Then we're going to free up the surface again. All right, because it's going to get reused here, and you're going to need to do that each time as far as going on it. All right, otherwise it's just going to keep creating more and more surfaces. All right, then we go to on render here, and in this we're going through checking as far as the lines for displaying out. If their textures are not null, then we'll go ahead and sit there and do query as far as the width and height of the texture. All right, and we'll go ahead and render that texture. All right, let's see down here. Okay, here we're just copying it in as far as into the rectangle on it. Now, the line height as far as for Y position, all right, is C times the line height. All right, because that way it moves it down the right amount of spaces. And we're not using H here because, like I said, it could potentially, depending on the font and all you're using, move you much further down than you really need to be. So this gives you proper spacing as far as on that. SDL rectangle copy. All right, taking that new taking that same rectangle for each line. It's being changed, as far as on that. Just a second. Sorry. And then we distort the texture, and because it's going to get new ones created back on loop here each time we do that. So the pointer's still valid. It's just that the address will no longer be, because if you come back here, it's going to assign a new address to it, and you're just going to end up filling up your memory if it doesn't work properly. And I'm not sure that they have a system that can sit there and tell whether or not it's in there, so I'm pretty certain it doesn't. I'm going to assume that it doesn't. That's way. So we destroy the texture, and then it goes through and creates new textures each time, and that's the safe method that I can think of. All right, and then all we do when we exit is you're going to have to remember to free your surface and destroy all your textures that you've created and close the font, and then your background exit and so forth like that. Now, going back over to this website over here on lib, there's a ton of information as far as on the APIs and stuff like that, and keyboard handling, and keyboard events, everything from surfaces to event handling. All right, and I would suggest doing what you can to get familiar with it as you go through and use it. This is probably the best source of information you're going to find. It tells you the size of characters and everything. Sometimes there's code in here as far as it gives you examples. It's not always there, but it's a good place to sit there and definitely look things up. All right, but anyway, it's fairly simple. Like I said, there's not everything in here is. I was using this for actually running check as far as to the console I have that comes up beforehand. So there's some of this can actually be taken out here like this, and it's fairly simple. It gives you the ability to sit there and at least know what you need to do to look out for and so forth when it comes to stuff like that. You can create your own console, preferably often a different class or something like that. But the biggest thing to grab from here is that your keyboard handler like this allows you to use or look for multiple keys at one time. And so if you want to check for a key state or something like that, you can sit there and do that real easily. As far as you can check your keyboard handler in here, if you did handler dot, let's say is pressed, and then SDL, let's see, scan code dash A, I think, yeah, it's gonna be A. So like that, and you could sit there and then check for and another one. All right, and if you want a keyboard to not be pressed, put a not sign in front of it, and that will be for not pressed. All right, and so it's just that simple. All right, and that way you can tell whether or not it's pressed. And so if we went here and we did something as simple as std colon c out, we'll see this on my terminal portion. A is not pressed. Alright, so build it, run it, and we can see A is not pressed, and if I hit A is pressed. Alright, real simple. Okay, so that concludes this tutorial. I hope you find it useful. Please like, subscribe, and thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.